Just check the do. It's probably fine. All right, good. All right. Welcome to Insights as a Service. This week we are talking all things chief financial officers. Well, chief financial officer as a role and what it does and why it's important, and how it can be a driver for business success. And to help me with all of that, because I know very little on the subject, is David King, the CEO at the CFO Centre, and Dinesh Thuraisingham, who is the principal CFO at the Centre as well. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us, Brandon.
No, thank you for being here. I guess just as very welcome. As a little, bio, I'll just do a quick intro for you guys. You can fill in the gaps. David, I checked this before recording as well, so I'm pretty sure this is right, that you've had 9 years with the CFO Centre. You're a regional director. You're now CEO of the Centre, and you yourself have been a CFO in a number of roles. And Dinesh, you've got a lot of experience in the ICT space, which is very relevant for our audience. Having worked with cyber intelligence and Spirit Internet, you've also been CFO you've had CFO and commercial functions across a range of other industries as well. Why are we talking about the role of the CFO? It strikes me that it's a poorly understood role, how it differs potentially from that of an accountant, how it can be a real driver for growth, and how and when a company that's growing in the MSP space, there's a lot of smaller companies, when it's appropriate to look to incorporate a CFO role into the organizational structure. And I think what you guys are doing at the Centre gives a pathway into that. And so we'll come back and talk about that. So we've got chartered accountants and we've got CFOs. And while CFOs are often chartered accountants are not necessarily CFOs. Can you talk to us about what the difference is between the two?
Yeah, absolutely, Brendan. There's certainly a feeling amongst us at the CFO Centre, and I think broader than that the role of the CFO isn't very well understood, especially in the small to medium size or SME space. And, the crux of the difference, which I guess every business owner needs to be aware of, is that an accountant per se will come to a fork in the road, sometimes earlier in their career and sometimes later, where they either stay in the accounting profession and keep practicing as a public accountant, and that's their primary focus is around legal structuring for asset protection purposes. It's around tax planning and tax compliance. And others, like myself and Dinesh, we decided at some point to move into the commercial world, where we've worked our way up through the ranks to the role of CFO in larger organisations in a full-time in-house capacity, where we've effectively become the right-hand person to the MD or the CEO, helping them and the management team with everything from strategy setting and execution right through to taking the reins of the finance department, really driving financial performance improvement throughout the whole organisation, with a real focus on things like profit improvement, cash flow management, funding, risk minimisation, those sort of important things that you'd expect to have in a larger business. With a practicing accountant, as I say, it's more of a focus on those other issues around tax and structuring, which is great because as CFOs, that's not what we do. Obviously, we need to make sure those functions are well attended to for our employer, or like us now for our clients as outsourced CFOs, but it's not what we do. So all of our clients have an external accountant. The thing we've got in common with the external accountant, as you alluded to, is we have similar qualifications, whether we're chartered accountants or CPAs or what have you. But it's that depth of commercial, on-the-ground commercial experience which sets the CFO apart differently from an accountant who's practicing and has a bit more of an outside looking in approach to their clients, which is totally understandable, as opposed to us where we're actually in the trenches getting that really deep knowledge and understanding of what drives the business how we can improve it, and making sure that management get all the information they need every month and every day to make well-informed decisions.
Yeah, that's been huge for us. We, with my Lightwire hat on, we created the group CFO role when we got to about 100 staff, I think it was. And Nigel Hazelwood's been huge. And just the clarity now in terms of performance, how we're going towards certain metrics, the ability to state specific metrics, for example, profit per service, or whether we're really trying to drill down into CAC and understand that. He just provides the insights that we wouldn't otherwise have. And as we've also got bigger and had to get really smart with our cash flow management, as we've taken on bigger and bigger projects, he's given us the tools and the ability to understand how we'll go about that. So, but for us, we went from 0 to 100. We didn't have that role. We went from a sort of head of accounts with an external accountant to having an in-house CFO with a team. Now, you can probably do that when you get to 100 or so people, and we certainly could. But in your experience, at what size does a business really need to start to think about incorporating a CFO role?
It's obviously slightly different for every different business. I mean, part of it comes down to the speed or their tracking of growth, just how fast they're growing. Sometimes it comes down to their complexity of their business model. And sometimes actually quite often it comes down to the internal capabilities within their existing team. If they've got a good person in the finance function, or indeed, the owner themselves is quite financially astute, then they might be able to sort of go along a bit longer before needing at least what we call ourselves a part-time CFO. But our rule of thumb is broadly that when you hit sort of around the $2 million turnover mark per annum and beyond, very rough rule of thumb, then you're starting to feel the growing pains associated with that growth in the form of might be cash flow constraints, employing more people or having multiple premises. All those things just add more pressure on the owner and the management team, as well as pressure on cash flow, obviously, as well. So, beyond that 2 million mark, we see that a part-time outsourced CFO solution can be a really good way to help them get to wherever it is they want to get to faster, for all those reasons we just sort of talked about in terms of what a CFO is about. Still having their external accountant, we work hard to get the external accountant on side, so we're coming together with a holistic approach to our mutual client, and making sure that every facet of the finance function is being well attended to. And we've had some great outcomes where we've helped clients get to the size where then they need a full-time in-house CFO, and then we've helped recruit that right person for them. And then, we say goodbye, but, we've done our job.
Just to add to David's statements there, I think if you look at, as a rule of thumb, we typically use 2 million as a revenue benchmark before a part-time CFO becomes something that's, a company can think of. But I think what David alluded to as well, in terms of complexity of the business, and if the business is embarking upon a strategic direction or a plan and goes into, even inorganic growth in terms of M&As, when that complexity comes in, I think that's where a CFO can add value on top of the routine management reporting and cash flow forecasting and all of that.
You touched on something I wanted to bring up there, which is the problems companies are typically looking to solve when they bring in a CFO. You touched on mergers and acquisitions there, that perhaps they're looking to access finance in the most beneficial way possible. They're looking to create the right company structure, but maybe that's not it. What type of problems do you most commonly see lead a business to create the CFO role?
We've got broadly speaking, two types of clients. Those that want to grow, they're ambitious, and they're quite savvy to know that they need to surround themselves with the right support and the right advice earlier rather than later. And then we've got those that didn't stop and consider that, and they've grown, and now they've got the classic growing pains, or there might have been some sort of industry downturn or something else that's happened to the business, and they're having hard times. And we happily work with either of those. I guess at the end of the day, we love to start with, what does the owner want out of this business? Why did they get into it? And what does success look like for them personally and the business? And then let's get them clear on how to get there as fast as possible in a sustainable way. So sometimes the problem we solve is helping them get clarity over their next phase and their strategy. Sometimes they've got the clarity, but the problem we solve is that we're a very experienced pair of hands that can help execute the strategy and bring it to life. Some of that, as you alluded to, could be around mergers and acquisitions, or it could be just funding in general to fuel their expanding product or service lines. So we certainly love to work in that space in terms of, I guess, first of all, getting them to understand what their current balance sheet is actually telling us, because a lot of managers and owners don't really understand the balance sheet of their business. They understand the profit and loss. So it's really getting them to understand the balance sheet, what it looks like at the moment, then putting some robust forecasts in place around whatever the plans are. Then we can really be clear on what the funding requirements are and the best channel to pursue, whether it's debt and going to the bank or different banks or finance brokers, or whether it is more of an equity raise and looking at attracting investors in and that type of thing. The ones that have fallen on difficult times, the problems we solve there is about turning them around. So, profit improvement is very much key. So profitability levels are not where they should be. That's leading to then, at least in part, to severe cash flow shortages. And rather than just simply asking the bank, for instance, for more money, it's about what's in the balance sheet that shouldn't be there that can actually be transformed into cash in the first place. Or in regards to profitability, which products or services are making money for them, which ones are barely breaking even, and which ones are actually loss makers. And even just with that simple analysis that we love to do, it's amazing the decisions that flow for the business from that sort of analysis. So it's really giving information for clarity and for good decision making, whether that's growth, turnaround, even if they've got plans to exit or pass the business down to the next generation, we help get the roadmap in place, tell them the things that they need to know, not just the nice stuff. Sometimes it can be quite, the difficult stuff that needs to be said, but also just playing that sort of, I guess, support function so they've got a shoulder to lean on, because it can be quite lonely out there, quite stressful. So, ultimately we love to take a few balls out of the air for them and take them on ourselves and build that trusted partnership with them. Someone who's got their back and, more time for them to spend on the things they should be, hopefully more money in their pocket, less stress, and satisfaction of hitting whatever big goals they've got for themselves and the business.
I'm guessing too that you would find that there's a lot of these startup owner operators. I know in the MSP space this is true, that they, as you said, they're quite savvy. They understand, P&L. They understand, at least at a high level, balance sheets, but they probably aren't questioned often about, why is that valued at that on the balance sheet? Why did you capitalize that expenditure? Why didn't you capitalize that expenditure? Why are you depreciating at that rate? Like there's questions that people probably just put in the too hard basket or just aren't important. But as you scale and you want to drive enterprise value, getting those things right is probably going to save you some heartache down the road. If you're starting to look for finance options, you're going to have independent auditors pick stuff like that out. I assume that really that analysis of business function end to end by someone who understands it and is working inside of it, is going to far more effectively get ahead of those kind of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interpreting the numbers with our trained eye and then delivering in a way that that particular manager or owner understands. And you're quite right, to have a business that's investment ready, sale ready, or attractive to a lender like a bank, quite often there's a bit of work to be done first. You mentioned some things around, capitalisation of assets and stuff. Sometimes there's lazy assets sitting in there. Sometimes there's excess stock or inventory, which is just burning a hole in their pocket and consuming space on their factory floor. Sometimes they've got far too much sitting in their accounts receivable or their debtors. And it's just something simple to us is putting like some credit control and collection processes in place to bring that money in sooner, and avoid giving credit to, those that shouldn't be given credit to. And then when it comes to inventory around, well, why are we buying all this stuff that's really slow moving? Or why are we continuing to offer that? Because it's not a product that's actually making us any money. The review of the balance sheet and the analysis around it drives a lot.
I think again, to add to David's points, and to your point, Brendan, capitalization of assets. I think if you're if you're a small company and it's a couple of transactions, you might just ignore it and put it on the side burner. But as you scale, these sort of issues become a lot more important, and that's where I think analysis of the balance sheet is going to be extremely key, and analyzing each line item, and even things like what David mentioned, inventory turnover. If you're having inventory sitting in your warehouse and it's not moving, just doing the basic calculations around turnover will actually give you a lot of insights, and you can take your next steps as to how you're going to deal with those inventory items.
It seems that moving away from that revenue number, but the complexity model as to when you should engage a CFO, it strikes me that when you're growing a business and things are getting inevitably more complex, there's that risk that you'll just keep turning faster and spinning faster and faster for proportionately less return. And the role of a CFO is essentially to try and help you gain those economies of scale as you do spend, that you're actually getting greater returns. And it's so easy to lose those efficiencies as you add more staff, more inventory, more locations in which you're providing services. But it's having that someone who just owns that efficiency piece, that I guess fiduciary piece. I want to use that word every now and then. That's pretty much it, right? The more complex, the more need there is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with growth, it does set a whole new raft of challenges, and for some owners or managers out there, as you've alluded to, they simply then recruit more staff or start incurring more overheads, and that erodes those efficiencies, as you said. So for us, it's about making sure that the business is as lean as possible without putting undue stress on it. In some other cases, though, owners won't spend any money and just think that they can keep growing based on what they've got and burn their people out and what have you. Again, our role is to play devil's advocate and to say, well, this is what's going to happen. We're all about sustainable growth. That's what it comes down to. And we see so many business owners burning themselves out I think they think simply by working hard that success will come. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. It's about working smarter, obviously, to coin a popular phrase. And that's what we help them with. It's to say this is where you should be spending your time, putting your money. And if you're not delivering those efficiencies from growth, revenue growth that is, then why is that the case? Sometimes there's a reason for it for a period of time because you're reinvesting for the future. And if that's well understood, then that's fine. But it's actually looking at the underlying drivers of the business across the whole of the business, and having KPIs in place. Dinesh just mentioned stock turnover. There's a raft of KPIs that should be measured every month, and then you can start to see the trends and do some benchmarking against others in your industry to see how you're performing in those areas.
Yeah, benchmarking is a great call. Just going back about 5 minutes, you mentioned about that it's so important to have an owner or an MD clarify what they're trying to achieve, right? To actually have some definition of success, whether it's like a BHAG or a more tangible goal of 25 mil GP by FY26 or whatever it might be, right? Two questions. One, how often do you find it's very hard for a CFO to actually get that kind of clarity from an owner operator, if they put a line in the sand and say, this is what I want? And second question is, what other things are there that can get in the way of success for a CFO?
To answer the first part, I would, from my experience, maybe 50-50 between those that when you ask the question, they've got, a fairly good idea. They might not have a clue how to make it a reality, but they've at least got something in place. And the follow-up question is, well, why is that important? What would that give you? Just to really go a bit deeper again, and that's where you get the real gold. The things that can stop us being successful and helping them get there, sometimes it comes down to the personality of the MD or the owner, where they might actually not be up for taking advice. That sort of feeling that, I can, I know what I'm doing, and having all the answers themselves, which is obviously...
Yeah, they need to see you as an ally, right? Not an inquisitor.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Obviously there's some things that can happen that's outside their control, but, I think if you control the controllables, listen to sound advice, or seek advice, and then keep asking questions of those people like your CFO, to really ensure that you've got the right support for whatever it is that your need is, it's going to give you the best chance of success. Because, if you try and just keep working hard and trying to save a little bit of money, you've got to see a CFO as an investment. And with any investment, there's got to be an ROI on that, a return on that. And we certainly know that in terms of what we do. And that return should be in the form of all those things that I was saying, tangible results like more profit, healthier cash flow, higher business valuation at the end of the day as a result. The intangibles around more time for them to spend it on the things they prefer or need to be spending it on, maybe some less stress in their life. So you weigh those two forms of benefit together, and that should be the return that you're seeking for investing in a CFO.
I think that's an important point, David and Brendan. I think the return on investment, I think the owners have to basically view the CFO as a value add. Because if you look at an accountant or a tax agent, it's a compliance piece. So that's a must-have. But I think CFOs, if you can exhibit the value that you're going to bring to the business in the longer term, I think that's where the understanding has to be conveyed to the owners, I guess.
It's hard in that role, isn't it, where you're talking about, the personality element potentially getting in the way. It's hard because you've got to be open to questions. Like the whole point is, why are we doing it that way? Being able to sort of question that, and it's not to pressure them, but to double think their question, their thinking, to be a sounding board, to pressure test, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And if you're not someone who is open to having to explain your thinking out loud, then you're probably not going to like it. I think about our CFO Nigel and his relationship with Andrew, our group MD. Those two guys are pretty much joined at the hip nowadays, and there is a real openness to questioning each other's thinking. Like, why are you doing it that way? And there's no personality conflict there, because I think a lot of it, if you've addressed those sort of 5 dysfunctions where you've got that, accountability, vulnerability, that piece there where personality's out of the room and everyone's aligned on just trying to reach that very clearly defined success metric, and below that, everyone's on the same page. So that goes out of the room. I think it works really well, but I can certainly imagine that would be one of the key blockers to success. Have you seen anything other than personality? Are there ever any things perhaps like a company structure where there's too many shareholders involved, or that there's, I don't know, the business type is too niche that maybe it's hard to get your head around? I don't know. Is there anything like that that's come up?
Definitely with the number of stakeholders. That's a good one. That can range from a business that's actually got a board in place, and sometimes trying to get cut through because of the agenda and the hidden agenda of the board or board members can be problematic. Sometimes it's where you've got it's a privately owned business, but you've got 2, 3, 4 owners working in the business. Again, they've got their personalities and their thoughts and their agendas, and we try and play the middle person, almost like Switzerland, to try and keep the parties, on the same page. And we've got a really good example of that at the moment, which is actually a family business with 4 brothers, and they're all warring with each other. And our CFOs talking to myself and the regional director about, how do I keep it all going? And and I think in that particular case, we're going to introduce a business coach as well to coach each of them in terms of what's going on inside with their mindsets. So you definitely have those, and then right down to you've got a mum and dad business, and one of them might be in the business and the other one not, but then decisions being made around the dining room table at night, if you're not being let into those decisions, so if there's a voice that can influence the key decision maker that you don't have access to, and dialoguing with them directly, then it's like you're sort of operating with one hand behind your back, because you're not privy to everything that's being said, and they're not seeing you in action like the decision maker is. So it makes for a fairly hard process.
You're talking about stakeholder issues as well. I mean, I think if a company goes down the path of, again, coming back to M&As and acquisitions, I think it becomes imperative that the different stakeholders across the organizations get along very well. I think that's one of the issues that I've seen in my lifetime in terms of disagreements between the various companies that form the group. And I think that's where I think it's imperative that relationship is actually honed very early. And if there are any dissenting sort of views, it's got to be addressed early on in the M&A process as well.
Makes sense. I've tried to sort of turn my thinking around. When you see a weather app and it'll say 50% chance of rain tomorrow, and I've been trying to turn that around to 50% chance of sunshine. Let's be positive about this, and look at it that way. And so what I should have said instead of what kind of problems is what are the things that you can address to ensure success with the CFO role coming to the business. And the key thing is clarity on and agreement and buy-in on a shared goal, the right communication platforms, and I guess what's the word I'm looking for here? The communication platforms are the right. There's a good word here, but I'm not getting it. But that's okay. Essentially, the right people are talking at the right time and the right way with each other. But yeah, I think all of that sounds very real. I used to work in a family business, and all of that just gives me flashbacks, bit of PTSD. So we can move on from that. But something I had on my radar, and I don't know how comfortable you are talking about this, so feel free to push back. But CFO role at the moment, let's say, I don't know whether you want to go regional or capital cities, but if you're looking to employ a CFO full-time, what does that likely cost you in a business, say, under 50 mil? Sort
of depends whether it's a capital city or a regional centre, obviously. But if you're talking about Melbourne or Sydney, I don't know what Dinesh thinks, but it'd be pretty hard to get a true CFO, for anything under, 200, 250 as a minimum. I think the figure that jumped out to me was probably more like 300,000. So let's use that. I mean, that's a lot of money for a business to take on without immediate return. And let's be honest, there won't be immediate return. There'll be a period of assessment, a period of planning, and then there will be a period of implementation of those plans once they're agreed by the MD, the board, whoever. So keeping that in mind, there's going to be, a period where it's just an additional cost on the books. And I'm guessing that's where your model comes in, right? Like the CFO Centre enables you to go in without jumping right in the water, sort of put your feet in. Can you talk us through your model? Yeah, we'll do. So we're a global brand, a global business, unified in really wanting to change the lives of business owners, their staff and their families, just by helping make those businesses stronger and more successful. And we've got teams, regional teams, in 17 countries now, and around Australia we've got teams in pretty much every city other than I think at this stage Darwin and Hobart, and we're also in Auckland. And our model is to put a really experienced, true CFO with decades of commercial experience into an SME on what we call a part-time basis, having listened to what the business owner or CEO is telling us in terms of their needs, their issues, their desires. We can construct a work plan and get them to sign off on it in terms of like a rolling work plan in terms of what our level of involvement would be. We could be in a client on the more intensive side of things. We're in there 1 or 2 days a week, sometimes even more than that to start. And then at the other end, especially if they're, say, smaller sort of clients, we might be only in there a day or two a month or anywhere in between. It doesn't really work if we're not in there every month because it's hard to sort of really get traction and progress.
Yeah.
And then that involvement can be scaled up and scaled down depending on how the business is going and what sort of projects pop up or what have you. So, we just ride the journey with them. It's about, we've got 50 people around Australia. So part of our strength is that, first of all, we have the best chance of fitting the new client with a CFO that is going to work out from a personality, cultural fit, as well as from an experience perspective, rather than just a one-man band and what you see is what you get. And then secondly, because of that huge network around Australia, plus the 700 CFOs in our group globally, if our CFO doesn't have the answer to something, because not everyone's got all the answers, then they can reach out, and that happens all the time. They reach out to our network internally to seek those answers because there's a great chance someone else has been there and seen that or done that. And then on top of that, we've got a fantastic network of other professionals in other walks of life, like banks, accountants, lawyers, marketers, IT, which we can introduce to our clients when there's a need in those other disciplines. So, it's amazing. The 21 years we've been going, it's been an amazing ride, and we've helped thousands of businesses because of that sort of scalable model and that sort of ability to fit the right CFO to the right circumstance.
Dinesh, for you, what's the appeal of working with a small number of companies in a CFO role as opposed to just ensconcing yourself in a single entity?
Yeah, I think throughout my CFO tenures in various companies, I think what I've picked up is that the issues or the gaps in each of those companies were very similar. And my thinking in joining the CFO Centre was that experience that I've had, say 2 to 3 years in a particular company, could be actually offered to a lot larger portfolio of companies. And in that way, you actually bring value to more companies in a short span of time. That was basically my motivation to get into a CFO Centre, just to help more companies out, as opposed to have a fixed tenure of 3 to 5 years in one particular organization.
That's cool. I'm interested from a marketing perspective, but what activities do you undertake to educate the market and essentially generate demand for the service you provide to actually kind of do what we're talking about in this podcast, right? Like, why do you need a CFO? What would they add to your business? What problems do you currently have that would solve? How do you guys go about that?
Yeah, there's always new things we're trying to do or plan to do based, obviously everyone's got budgetary constraints when it comes to marketing spend, but, for us to this point, we've been doing things like using social media, putting articles and blogs out there, and videos. I've shot and we've posted a series.
That's where I saw you first, actually.
Okay.
So there you go. It's working. There you go.
And that goes across some of the social platforms, including LinkedIn. We run events and we deliver on topics of interest to business owners, and that just highlights the capability of us and the role of the CFO, but without trying to oversell it. It's more about delivering information to business owners. And there's plenty more that we can do. I mean, sometimes we find it challenging to reach our core target market, in terms of how do they receive information. And the most powerful way that we've seen work globally, and what we're really focused on now in Australia, is more word of mouth. So if you've got other professionals that also have similar looking clients, then if they really understand what we're all about and we understand what they're about, then being able to get cross referrals can be very powerful, because it's qualified before it even gets to you.
Advocacy, referrals, that's where it's at. It's the same for us. We've got a whole, sort of flywheel, well, not sort of a flywheel that's all focused around essentially getting us to the advocacy and referrals. But, as long as you essentially make sure you piss excellence, to be kind of crass, then you're going to do that, right? People will be happy to vouch for you and do introductions, but it's just getting all the work before that, right? But okay, that's cool. That is very interesting. I guess, again, because our audience is our MSPs, TSPs, etc. What's your experience been like in the technology space? Have you got any particular success stories or sort of war stories from our sector that you want to share?
Yep. So I've got one big one, and it's obviously around profitability. So with this organization that I worked with, I think this is a typical issue, right? I mean, if you're a growing company, what typically happens is you're so focused on the top line, sales, marketing, and all those activities. What tends to slip is a view on the bottom line, obviously, profitability. And in this particular company, I think.
With what measure of profitability are you thinking there? It's like EBITDA, EBIT, net profit. Like, what's the typical sort of measure of profitability people run with?
I think you're talking both direct costs, looking at direct costs and gross margins, as well as getting down to the net level. So in both those areas. But what happened was we actually typically had to go, because this particular company had over 5,000 customers and products. I think it was about 15 to 20 products across 4 or 5 major groups of products. So it was fairly complex business. We basically had to get the data to look into the profitability of each of those customers across the various products and services. It was a huge exercise, but I think the effort that went in actually yielded a significant amount of result for the company in terms of, actually, I think we look at it in terms of exponentially looking at about 2.4 to 2.5 million a year in terms of uplift in the bottom line. So it gave us good results. And I think what that particular exercise gave the company was, you looked at things all the way from revenue leakages to cost leakages to repricing to looking at the product line and even replacing the product with another. Various insights we got out of the exercise was a long-term benefit on top of the dollar amount that obviously the exercise yielded. So that was something that was actually quite pleasing as far as the work was concerned.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, one last question for you guys. Just you touched there on sort of that revenue and pricing piece. In your experience, what relationship does the CFO role have to the pricing methodology a company adopts?
Yeah, I think in terms of pricing, Brendan, what happens typically is a lot of companies, again, I'm generalizing, but I think this is across my experience. What I've seen is that pricing typically is made when you first start off in terms of what the market is offering and how you go in at a lower price point, without really looking at the cost elements that need to be factored in and putting a markup on that cost. using a bottom-up sort of approach. So I think one of the things I think is quite key is, and this is where I think a CFO can assist, is doing a bottom-up, even almost like a calculator sort of approach to pricing the products. And I think that's something that we can really add value in.
I'm always against sort of cost plus pricing, but you're dead right. You actually have to understand what the inputs are. Yeah. You can't price anything without understanding that. Yeah. And as businesses grow, that gets more and more complex. So I definitely buy that.
Yeah, I think the role of the CFO there is also just to get the data together, get the facts, the analysis done, from which then a conversation with, the head of sales, the MD, everyone can be in the same room, and you've actually got some factual content from which to make decisions rather than just running off gut feel.
Yeah, well, my experience is that with my chief revenue officer hat on, I'll usually put together some numbers that I think paint a picture of, ARPU or CAC or whatever. And then Nigel, our CFO, will sort of come in and say, let the adults take over, and he'll actually come back with some accurate data. So that's my experience. And it's a very valuable resource to have to actually give me the right numbers. So I buy that too. All right, guys, we better leave it there. We've gone just on time. So if anyone's looking to find either of you, I'm assuming LinkedIn's the best place to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn or our website, www.cfocentre.com. Either way, yeah.
Nice and easy.
Just reach out anytime if people just want to ask us a question. We're always happy to give our thoughts just to steer people in the right direction, whether it's through us or to somebody else. We're just happy to help.
Nice. I'm sure it's appreciated. All right. Well, thanks again, guys. Appreciate you coming on. It was great to do a bit of a deep dive on the CFO role. And to everyone else, we will see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks for having us, Brandon.